Thanks, Phil. Good afternoon. Are you guys all ready? All right, I'm going to share with you a ton of material today. I'm really happy to be here. I want to thank Phil again for having me speak to you. Thanks, Stephanie, for really helping assemble a great amount of content and people joining us today. As Phil said, I've walked in your shoes, maybe not in moccasins. I don't think I've ever wore moccasins. But I've been a CTO in startups. That's really where I got my chops in building products out, in building data and analytics, and being customer facing. I then did a stint of being a CIO in a number of different organizations that really needed to transform. And I used that experience to start writing and speaking on the topic. It eventually led to my book, Driving Digital. That's now an Amazon bestseller. And now I really enjoy coming to conferences and speaking and doing writing and also helping organizations with their transformation programs. So we're a few years into where transformation has become a mainstream term. I suspect most of you have some kind of transformation program running in your organization. And around 6 months ago, I started looking at some survey results that startled me. We're doing so much to change our organizations. And I see this coming out of the KPMG survey that 78% of CIOs feel their digital strategy is only moderately effective, and 55% feel the IT business alignment has gotten worse. And I'm like, what is going on? How is this possible that IT has been doing so much to enable the business over the last few years, partnering, doing agile, thinking about culture, putting DevOps practices in place, taking cost out with automation, and yet we start seeing this number. And the reason is that what we do on a day-to-day basis from a technology perspective is really hard. We're introducing all kinds of new things in our environment, from cloud computing, which creates an entirely new operating model, mobile devices, which changes the way our workforce is collaborating and working and getting access to information. We're bringing agile not just to IT, but really getting the business to think about minimal viable products, to think about how to prioritize, to think about technical debt and security aspects that we put into our products. And now we're thinking about DevOps, not just operating in the cloud. We're actually thinking about how do we automate, how do we make sure things are repeatable, how do we put automated testing in place. Everything I just said is the core blood of what it takes to be in IT today, and it consumes us. We think about all these processes and technologies to be successful, and we're forgetting the types of things that we really need to have in place to be successful. So I thought about this after that post came out, and I said, I think people get this. I think they understand why transformations fail, but I don't think they think about it enough. And it's really about the people aspects of it. We've heard it come up a number of times today and yesterday. It is a bottoms-up process, not just a top-down, so you can't just come out with strategy. You have to think about how the everyday person is going to contribute and participate in your transformation programs. And it's not something that you're just going to go out, put a P&L out and say, we're going to change the organization over the next 6, 12, or 18 months. We can probably see over the next 3 to 7 year horizon. Based on where we sit today, we certainly can't see beyond that. But if anybody thinks that the scope of technology is going to slow down 5 to 10 years out, I think we wouldn't be in the jobs that we're doing. So we know things are going to change dramatically. So today I want to share with you some of my secrets around how to think about a people-first technology change and how to think about transformation. People have asked me, Isaac, when is your next book coming out? This is material for the next book. This is the second time I'm only presenting it, so I'm really excited to share this with you today. The first thing I think about when I talk to a group about their transformation programs is, are we just talking about a transition? Are we moving from one technology to another? Or are we really transforming the business? We're doing something fundamentally different that's big and different and competitive than what we're doing today. When I think about these transformation opportunities, one of the things I'm always looking for is where's the growth and where's the revenue as part of that change. If all we're doing is changing experience, if all we're doing is affecting cost and making things more automated, those are really important things to work on, but I'm really focused on what's going to be the game changer, because I need something to go back to the organization and say we're doing something fundamentally different that's going to put us into a different business model over the time period that we're working together. Not only am I going to communicate this as a big bet, but I'm also going to communicate the things that are less important to me. Right? Every business leader comes to the office of the CIO and says, my project is most important. And it's not that their projects aren't important, it's that there's some that are more important than others, and then some are actually the ones that can really transform the business. So I'm looking for the one, and starting with the one to work on with that. The second thing is I'm going to be very upfront with my IT department, starting with them, and telling them that our business model needs to change. The way we used to operate 5 to 10 years ago is no longer applicable. The things that we're doing even today, different than 3 years ago, is no longer applicable. Somebody asked, where's too deep to ask, how do we get architects to think about the customer? That is a different question. I don't think I would have fielded that question just 3 years ago. But if an architect isn't thinking about the end user or who's selling their particular technology or how it's going to be used, they're not going to be successful. I think about different types of technologies that are going to be successful today that weren't really mainstream 5, 6 years ago. And I think a lot about low-code platforms. I think a lot about data integration and streaming technologies. So a whole new arsenal of things that we have to consider. And then lastly, I start thinking about how I'm going to sunset things. Gartner constantly comes out, your budgets are increasing maybe 3% year over year. So you're adding more technology to your landscape than what you can take away. That doesn't work forever. I think automation helps, right? Your cost to support new technologies should be less if you're implementing DevOps and automation as part of it. If you're using low code as part of it, it will drop down. But if you cannot shut down your legacy technologies fast enough, you're going to have two to support for a very long period of time. So I'm constantly talking about that. Now, I assume all of you are doing some form of agile in your organization. And when I ask people, what is it that you're doing about agile? I'm hearing things like, well, we do sprints, we plan our releases, we're using Jira, we're better aligned as a group, we're starting to talk about product management and product ownership. We're starting to do the things that enable us to deliver better than the waterfall projects of the past. That's great. That's all about the process of running agile in an IT organization and start bridging it out into the rest of the organization. Now, when I think about agile beyond that, when I think about people first, I think about this one principle in the manifesto about self-organizing teams. What does that mean outside of a startup? What are you empowering a self-organizing team to do? And what are you actually helping them make decisions around? So when we talk about changing the culture and having agile teams become self-organizing and having them own their destiny, I think about principles and an operating model for them to be able to make their decisions. So again, back to Sudipta's question, what markets are you really targeting? That might be very different than the customers that you serve today. That changes the mindset, right? We're not just going after fixes to an existing product or service. We're actually trying to go after a new market that may be our future business model. I'm thinking about non-financial drivers. It can be things like brand. It can be things like a new customer segment, going global, being more secure. These are the drivers that are influencing our decisions around what technologies we're investing in. I think about excellence, and this comes to mind in terms of KPIs. What are the things as an IT group that are important to us every 3 to 6 months to review and understand and improve on? And then I think about constraints, right? The story of a colleague of mine that once came to me, showed me a diagram and said, build me this, and it looked like Google on a piece of paper. I did not have the talent, the skills, the technologies to go build Google as a CIO of Business Week, right? We all live with constraints within the solutions that we can actually go out and put out, and so that needs to be expressed up front. I then think about the operating model. These are the things that give your teams the skills and the tool sets to actually operate independently around culture, around design-first thinking, around the types of things that you're delivering, the types of technologies you're working with, how you think about releasing, right? We're not going to go and do a whole cab exercise anymore. We're going to release more frequently. And again, back to operating KPIs, the types of things that we want to improve on. All this puts together, when you put this all together, and I do a lot of workshops with organizations around this, no organization I've worked with is exactly the same. We all start with the fundamentals of Agile, but then we go into how do we want to operate, how do we want to align it to our organization, what do we want to empower teams to do by themselves, where do we want to create standards, what types of technologies do we want to make into platforms, and where do we want to become innovative. Okay, so these are the things that you need to think about and that you need to plan for if you're really going to scale your Agile practice. How many of you see C-suite in the room? I just want to get a picture of that, a handful of you, right? So one of the things I found most challenging about being in a C-suite picture or reporting to one, which I did at times, is thinking about what your role is in changing the mindset of your executives that you're working with. And so a lot of this takes habits, the way we used to do things, and changes them to new things that you need to operate on. It starts, we talked about getting a seat at the table. There's a bunch of things that I know that I need to do as the head of IT. Things like cloud migrations and dealing with risk and reducing costs. I am not going to talk about most of those things with my executive team. Those are table stakes. They expect me to be able to do this. They want to hear where technology is going to make them more differentiating, more automated, better aligned with what customers are doing, and where intelligence and analytics are going to drive competitive changes. That's the places where I want to have dialogue with my board, with my executive team, with their direct reports. Even though I'm doing all this other stuff underneath the hood, I got to change the way people are talking about IT in the organization. All right, so that's the offense I put into talking to the C-suite. The defense, all right, how many people remember this movie? I got a few nods. I told somebody yesterday I thought I had this slide in there. This is my favorite quote around change management. At some point, you got to shut down the things that were part of your legacy. And there are people, particularly in the executive group, that are going to hold on to the way you used to do things for dear life. They've learned that. They've made their business and their profits off of it. Their bonuses are tied to it. Again, I'll tell you a story from Business Week. Think of an ad salesperson that only knows how to sell print magazine articles and tell them to sell digital at 10 cents on the dollar, right? That's a completely different mindset in terms of how to sell digital ads versus print ads, and it is a game changer that you have to challenge. The last thing, when you're involved in running a transformation program, is don't think it's going to be easy. Don't think you're going to sit hands and everybody's going to agree and we're going to be able to go run and make changes in your organization. There is going to be a colleague out there or two who are going to be jealous about the things that you're doing, and they're going to put that target on your back and look for your mistakes. And you know you're going to make mistakes. You're going to fail and learn from them. There are going to be a lot of unknowns. There are going to be things that they want you to move faster on, and it's going to be hard for you to keep up with that. So look out for that. And the way I battle that is I communicate very frequently. Most of you are not in huge enterprises. You don't have somebody in communications reporting to the CIO. You have to take that on as an IT leader very seriously about how you're going to communicate your current status, your successes, and your speed bumps. I champion early adopters. I make them fans, right? So looking, particularly when you talk about things like citizen development, where you bring technologies out to the organizations, make them the heroes in terms of what they're actually performing and the value they're bringing to the organization. And lastly, pick the right battles. This is a really hard thing to pull off when you're changing the culture and your business models. There are some things that are worth your attention to go after, and there's other things you just got to let go and let someone in your staff handle as a normal course of business. Okay? Makes sense? Now we're going to go into analytics. I talked a little bit about Agile and applications, and now a little bit in terms of how you're working as a leader. Data and analytics and artificial intelligence is going to be the new place where you're competitive. Finding ways to use your data to make better decisions, using analytics in your customer-facing products and services. These are all things that we're going after in some shape or form. And the lifeblood of this is talent. Okay, there isn't enough talent today to go around in terms of data science and analytics capabilities. And so this is where I think programs around citizen programs are truly important. Bring the analytics to the end user and make them successful. But the only way to do this and not end up with the mess that we've had in prior decades of business objects and tons of reports or spreadsheets and tons of spreadsheets out there that are replicating data all over the place is to think of data governance a lot more expansively. Now, we think about data governance in terms of how it affects our organization, what policies that we're putting out, how to protect our data, how to actually make sure that we're GDPR compliant. These are all the things that are compliance factors in putting data governance out. But if I'm going to put new tools out, I want my teams, I want my business users to use them responsibly. I want them to integrate into my data sources. There's a number of things that I'm going to do to help them along the way. I talked to somebody about this yesterday in terms of what governance means when you're actually working with your business groups. And I think about on the data side, data catalog so that they know where the data exists and what data is available to them and what the access rights are to them. And then actually getting into data dictionaries and analytics dictionaries. So when you look at a date or you look at a currency in a database, you have a shared understanding of what that data means so that you can use that in your analytics. Right? Without that, I don't understand what people are doing in their Tableau dashboards without having some form of understanding of what data they're using. Lastly, I think about this new concept called data ops. This is all the background work from getting data from its sources to dealing with data quality to identifying master data issues, and then actually having a practice of bringing new data sources into play. So you can constantly sourcing new data, bringing it into your ecosystem, and figuring out how to bring value to it. That's the collective picture of what I term as proactive data governance. It's taken data governance from the reactive and from the defensive to how do you do it and instill it in parallel to your BI programs so that you can be more competitive. Does that make sense? All right, so let's talk about emerging technologies just a little bit. I guarantee that most of you are doing one of these two in your near future, if not now. How many of you are AI or IoT somewhere in the next 3 years, if not now already? Okay, and I see just about every hand raised. And that's where emerging technology is becoming mainstream. We're all doing it a little bit differently. We have different business value that we're going after. But when I think about the use cases, where's Tim? There's my picture, Tim. I think about the use cases, where I want to bring these technologies in. I'm looking for things that are really obvious, simple use cases that are helping people out. In this case, finding information in your enterprise data warehouse, in your enterprise content management systems, finding the right people to go to. Every one of us has this problem to some extent, and it's an age-old problem that needs to get bigger and better and smarter so that we can make our people work more efficiently. One of the first things that I do when I think about AI use cases is really think about the business opportunity. I assume that I can solve the problem, but I need to understand what value it's going to drive if and when I solve it. So it needs to be a big enough picture, a big enough pie for me to be interested in order to invest in something like an AI or an IoT. I think about the data landscape. Do I have the data that supports the hypothesis that I want to go after? If the data doesn't exist or if it's not cleansed enough, I know I have enough of a project that's a lead-in to my AI project before I go into it. I think about the AI capabilities and where I'm going to partner to get an understanding of what machine learning, natural language processing, artificial intelligence algorithms that are out there, because my team are not the experts, and I need partners out there to help me understand them. And lastly, again, back to the people side of things, is the agile culture, right? We know we learn from doing our agile processes. We take feedback in, we get smarter about our priorities, and then we go and iterate over that. If you're not doing that in emerging technologies, you're in bad shape, because there's a lot of learnings and failed missteps in terms of working with new technologies. And the hardest thing about this is explaining that to your CFO. I can't guarantee you results in 3 months. We are learning along the way. I'm going to give you feedback every 4 to 8 weeks in terms of what we're learning, whether we're on the right track, whether we need to pivot, or whether we even need to stop in terms of what we're working on and look at a different problem to go after. So if you don't have that agile mindset and your executive team, going back to an earlier slide, your executive team wants you to stay to a fixed 1-year plan. Here's the budget for 2020. I expect you to hit it quarter by quarter. It's really hard to go after emerging technologies. Let's talk a little bit more about culture. Now, I want you to take a step back and think about what your culture is in your organization, how you're working with people, what are some of the signs of good culture, and what are some of the signs of bad culture. And what I find is that when we talk about culture, I think we're pretty good as a group to identify the types of things that represent warning signs or elements of bad culture. When we have really poor communications, very hard to get information from one group to another, when you're feeding information out one left ear to the right ear because there isn't a formal standard in terms of how you're communicating to people, I think we all recognize that as a bad culture omen. When people aren't getting along, when we know that there's teams that need to collaborate or people within teams and they have different mindsets and different objectives and they're not getting along, we're pretty good at identifying that as a negative culture. We're also good in IT at recognizing that when we're fighting every day the latest set of issues, that's a really bad culture problem to climb out of. So I think we're pretty good at identifying what bad culture is. I also think we're pretty good at identifying what good culture looks like. And we have this utopian view that culture is about people getting along, people volunteering, we're standing up, we're doing our commitments in Agile. So we have a pretty good idea of what bad looks like. We have a pretty good idea of what good looks like. We struggle how to get and resolve problems in between those two extremes. So I'm going to share you some of the programs that I put in place for people to understand that, because every one of these is unique by organization. I think about 4 different attributes that go into a culture transformation. It starts with being smarter. Smarter is really around data and analytics and how decisions are made. It's not just about smarter, because if you're smart and slow, you're going to take 6 months to identify a new technology or 9 months to figure out that a business case is viable. Those are not going to work well in today's world, so we need to be faster and smarter at the same time. And faster is how quickly can you release a new product offering, how quickly can you resolve a production issue, how smart can you be listening to your customers and identifying the types of things that you need to deliver for them. We need to be differentiating, and so some of the things that we need to do, not everything needs to be innovative, and to me that's really about problem solving and realizing that we need to go to customers and say, we are better at some things than your competitors, and here's why to work with us. And then I think about better, and better really is a statement around quality, right? Where are things that we do that need to be excellent quality, top shelf, really good, and where are some of the things that we're doing that could be good enough? I don't know if you have that conversation with your team when requirements come in and you say, I just need to check the box on this one, whereas this one I need to excel at. It needs to have high performance, high reliability. It needs to handle every exception case around that. Right? Those are the kinds of things that align teams better. And when you say to them this has to be good enough, they're going to solve that particular problem a little bit differently than when they have to have something with excellence. Transformation, for me, has been in my career. My advice to this group is ride your career like your life depends on it. You know, the lifetime of CIOs and direct reports to CIOs is still in that 3 to 5 year time frame. So we really have to make an impact. So start by making a calling, right? What is the one thing, the 2 things that you're really going to really get your organization rallied around and make sure that they know that this is really important. Change how people are talking and the dialogue around culture, right? And the words that I use are smarter, faster, better, and innovative. You need to find the words that resonate in your organization. It might be different words, it might be different principles, but you need to get people homed in on the types of things that you want to think about. When I think about agile culture and a mindset, I really think about this balance of, are you making decisions around minimal viable product? Are you committing to getting things done? Are you releasing with some kind of frequency and cadence that people find the organization reliable in terms of making improvements? Oil and digging for oil in data means looking for the nuggets that are really going to make impact. One of the things I talk about in the book is how to apply agile in a data science program when you don't really know what you're looking at, right? You're doing complete discovery, you're doing machine learning experiments, you're changing different types of algorithms that you're working with, and you're trying to find the things that are going to make things successful. And then lastly, take some bets, right? We don't win as an IT organization by playing it safe without looking at some things that might make an impact. If you do not have an innovation budget, this is the time to think about how to fight for it for next year's budget. If you do, think about running it like a portfolio so you can take 2 or 3 bets. If you have an innovation portfolio, how do you communicate the successes and the speed bumps along those lines? Those are the things that are going to move our organizations forward. That's me. I'm going to be doing a lot more speaking and writing about this. I do a lot of work helping organizations with their transformation programs. I guarantee you have some commonalities in terms of what you're struggling with and what you're targeting, and I think you also have some things that are quite unique to your organization that you need to figure out. And that's me today. Thank you.
We have time for one question.
And I don't have swag, but...
Yes.
Yeah. I'll give you a hint. I do have a book here.
Kirk Keller, University of Missouri. And my question kind of gets back to one that I'd asked in the opening last night. You had the one slide about the things you talk more about and the things you talk less about.
Yep.
But those things that you indicated that we would talk less about, we have to do them in order to be able to do those other things we want to talk more about.
Yep.
Tips on how to be able to connect that to where the business understands that.
Yeah, it's tricky, because part of keeping the lights on and improving things are operating KPIs that someone in the organization cares about. But when you have that dependency, right, I have technical debt, I have a security issue, I have to do some data integration, I have to do some consolidation or rationalization, and it's work I need to do before I get to the thing that you're asking for. I make it front and center of the conversation. I make sure people are aware of that, because not only do I have to make the investment to actually make that happen, I want to make sure that when I make the investment and I reduce that technical debt or I do the application rationalization, there's a story at the end of it saying, we're going to turn something off here. That's part of the story that needs to be told up front. And part of the story needs to be, not only am I going to deliver value from a business perspective, but how this is going to change the IT landscape in terms of how I'm supporting things. All right, and that gets, if you're building a new application, how are you going to automate it? Right? How are you going to automate deployment? How are you going to put continuous testing in place? Those are the kinds of things that separate out legacy applications of yesterday where nobody wants to touch it versus an application today where you can say, hey, I can get you a release with improvements and bug fixes every month because I've automated all this stuff up front. So I got to get used to telling that story. I got to start small so that I can get some wins around it, and then I got to market the heck out of it so people understand that IT can be successful doing it.
Isaac, thank you very much. Wonderful job again.